All right, so my name is Deanna, and I am autistic. I have seen a lot of content creators coming out, really just regular people sharing their stories, and it's what helped me realize that I was autistic. And I feel like I'm at a point where I know enough about myself to want to share that. This may never reach anyone. My channel may never grow. A lot of channels don't. I'm not here for growth. I'm here to help, to share my story in case it resonates with anyone. As an autistic, I'm tired. I'm tired of life. I'm tired of trying. I'm tired of failing in anything I try to accomplish, in anything I put effort into. I'm 33, 34, can't even keep track of my own age, and I think this is what being 60 feels like. I don't know. I have no perspective. All I know is I can't keep doing this. I can't keep going through life. And nobody sees it. And that's the hardest part. Nobody sees the struggle. And they just assess you and judge you based on neurotypical standards, which isn't fair. And it's gaslighting. And it leads you into behaviors where you end up gaslighting yourself constantly, feeling like you're not good enough or there's something wrong with you because you can't do basic tasks. Because you can. You can do these basic tasks, but it takes you so much more than anybody else that a lot of the time you don't, or you can't find the energy to. And it's difficult to explain, and it's difficult to understand in your own body, never mind to try to explain it to somebody else. And both of these problems are more complex because with autism, understanding how you are doing internally and understanding how to communicate that to others is already two core aspects of autism where we struggle. And so that makes it really difficult when other people are placing expectations on you that are unrealistic for you to achieve because nobody realizes how much you're struggling above and beyond what anybody else is going through, because autistic traits are normal. They are things everybody struggles with from time to time. What makes it a disability is that you struggle with these things to such an extent that it disables your life. So for me, I'm high functioning. I can act normal. I can accomplish daily tasks. I can live alone. That being said, while I may seem well put together from the outside, I'm not. And I'm going to go through that with you. I have a document here because, of course, I script everything. I'm autistic. I'm 34, and autism has ruined my life. Everyone I've met has eventually rejected me in one way or another. I have not held down a job for longer than a year. I have not maintained a relationship for longer than a year. I have never had a true friend, and I am not close with my family. Every person that has ever been a part of my life in any capacity is no longer in my life. I carry extensive trauma that is reinforced with everyday situations, conversations, every single day, small things, and it's all reinforcing all of the trauma that I have. I struggle with anxiety, I struggle with depression, and I can't go to a therapist because therapists, they treat the symptoms. They don't see the underlying cause. And when you try to treat depression without adjusting for what's causing the depression, you're just going to end up on meds that are increased and then different meds and then increase that dosage because they're trying to fix a symptom without treating the underlying cause. So it's just going to keep coming up. That's why therapy doesn't work for most autistics, because they're not considering the whole picture. They're just trying to fix what they can see. They're just trying to fix what they have the capacity to solve. Because to get a talented, skilled therapist that understands autism and all of its underlying conditions and how to pick apart when certain conditions have overlapping symptoms and work into your childhood trauma and try to build you up into a person who can function, which involves stripping away maladaptive habits and trying to help you find a way to move through the world that is more functional for you, that is extremely difficult for anyone to do. And most therapists don't have the skill or capacity to help someone that is truly mentally disabled. Unfortunately, our healthcare system is structured around people who need a little bit of support, people who can functionally access this support. So for people who need more intense care, they generally speaking don't have access to higher skilled therapists because they cost more money and they're not usually supported by government programs. And most therapy offices will only take insurance from companies that you won't be able to work for as an autistic. You won't be able to attain the benefit package that would pay for therapy because as an autistic, you're struggling to just maintain some kind of income so you can just survive. Back to my document here. I have never maintained my health or my teeth or my vehicle, and it all stems from a difficulty surrounding phone calls and anxiety around appointments. Now, it's a lot more complicated than that. It has to do with executive functioning. It's not just anxiety, and it's not just trauma. I have always struggled with processing and understanding. Even from a young age, I struggled to find something to eat in the kitchen. I still struggle with this now. It's the same feeling I get about trying to figure out what to do with my free time. I think about each option, I decide what I don't want, and then I can't land on anything I do want. And then I just give up. I regularly find safe foods that I will repeatedly eat, but it doesn't last long, and I get bored. So, I generally speaking don't eat a lot. And it's not that I have an eating disorder, and it's not that I'm depressed, or the lack of eating isn't caused by the depression. If you put a plate of food in front of me, I'll eat it. My problem is with deciding what to eat or deciding what to do with my free time. I'll consider each option and I will imagine myself doing the thing. I will imagine myself eating the thing, and I will think, is this something that I want? Or I will think, what about this thing do I not like? And I can't land on a decision as to what to eat, what I want. I think it's called decision paralysis. Some people call it that. There's also something called ADHD paralysis, which is where you get overwhelmed by the quantity of things that need to be done. And it doesn't take much for that to happen compared to neurotypical standards. So for a neurotypical, it would be go to work, get home, have a shower, prepare a meal, prepare food for the next day, chat with a friend for an hour, put your kids to bed, all these different things, and that's way too much for a neurodivergent to handle. Most neurodivergents, we can't handle working full time while still taking care of ourselves. Usually when I'm working, my last job, I had day on, day off. And what would happen is I would get home and I wouldn't eat and I wouldn't shower. And I would usually just sit in one spot and rock in place. And then the next day, I would have a little more capacity. And I would be able to start thinking about, okay, I should eat something. I should do the laundry. I should try to make sure that I'm ready for work the next day. And my last job was pretty good for me because it made food as part of the establishment. So I was able to attain food without having to put in extra time and effort planning and preparing a meal ahead of time, which really helped me because that is a huge extra effort for me as a neurodivergent person to try to prepare that for the day ahead. And it really burns me out when I have to add all of these extra steps into my routine. It doesn't take much to overwhelm us. And when we try to place neurotypical standards on ourselves, we start gaslighting ourselves because we're just not capable of it. But then other people, they'll look at us and they'll see, oh, you have so much free time, you just sit around all day, you never do anything. Or alternatively, they'll come to you and they'll say, you know, you don't seem like you're doing that well. I think you should get out. I think you should go and do something fun, go out and be around people. None of that is helpful. We seclude ourselves because that's where we're safe, that's where we're comfortable, because whenever we leave our safe space, we're being triggered, we're being judged, we're being gaslit. And you know what I find to be a really interesting clashing is that they say with autism, you have a hard time reading people's facial expressions, reading people's emotions, but at the same time, you end up learning how to do these things because you can't, because you're putting so much effort into trying to understand what's going wrong, and you have a trauma response of picking up on these things because of how many times things have gone wrong for you. And so what happens is that you end up picking up on micro facial expressions that are hard to recall, hard to explain, that the person may not even remember having actually shared with you, but you pick up on it. And it alters the way you think and you behave, because they'll give you that micro facial expression of judging you, of thinking you're weird, of thinking you're off, of thinking there's something wrong with you in the way that you're communicating when you're trying so hard to fit in, to act normal, to smile, to connect with other people. And yet every time you reach out, you're excluded from the group, from the conversation, because you don't fit in. It's not that you want to be antisocial, it's that whenever you reach out for that connection, you are pushed away from the group. And on top of that, you have overstimulation, because when you get more than one person in a room, the cumulative effect is overwhelming for an autistic. For me, even just a one-on-one is extremely difficult for me to manage. But in that situation, at least, I have the person's full attention. When you start adding another person into the mix, suddenly those two people are communicating well, and you're the only one who's communicating differently. So they're going to start talking with each other, and automatically you are being excluded from the conversation because you are not connecting in the same way. You're not communicating in the same way. Once you get someone alone and you have their full attention, you can actually start to have a bit of a back and forth. And you can tell them and share with them how you communicate, why you're saying this, why things are different, and they can start to understand you because in a one-on-one, they have that time, they have that energy, that capacity, that attention to learn about how you communicate. What's really difficult in a workplace setting is that your colleagues will try to be professional, they'll try to be friendly, and what they're doing is they're masking as a neurotypical. And what that means is they're not being honest, they're not being forthright, and they're not going to put in effort to learn how to connect with you and how to communicate with you as a neurodivergent person and how to support you, because that is more effort than they're willing to put in for a coworker. You don't matter to them. They'll act like you matter. They'll act like a friend. They'll act friendly to you, but they don't really care. The really confusing thing is you're not allowed to say that. You're not allowed to say, yo, you don't care about me, when it's very clearly obvious that you don't, but you're not allowed to say that. And that's very gaslighting. That's very gaslighting. Circling back around to my document, and this is getting pretty dark, but it needs to be said. I have always been suicidal. Always. And that's the part that shows you it's a disability, because this depression, this anxiety, these suicidal thoughts have been present from a very young age. It's been consistent throughout my life. Now, I've never been a person to act on these thoughts, but suicidal ideation is something I think every neurodivergent struggles with, and it's something we don't talk about enough because suicidality is banned. It's verboten. You're not allowed to speak about it because it makes everybody so uncomfortable. Like, people who commit suicide are somehow committing some sort of criminal act against the people who are still alive, when really they just couldn't continue. They couldn't keep it up. It was just too much. They weren't receiving the support they needed. They weren't receiving the understanding they needed. And then suddenly when they're gone, everybody's like, oh, I cared about you. Oh, I would have made time for you. Oh, if they had only reached out. They did. Most of the time, these people, they did reach out. They did try. But in the end, there wasn't that emotional safety to come to you and tell you honestly how they are feeling. Because as soon as you tell someone you're feeling suicidal, the reaction automatically creates defensiveness, which makes you avoidant and pull away, and then you're in your own head and you have no support. Even if you're surrounded by people who claim to love you, who claim to care about you, if there isn't that emotional safety that you can openly talk about your internal experience, that's what happens. People end up committing suicide. And it's not fair that the survivors are the ones that tell the story. And they tell the story of how that person was bad because they didn't reach out, because they gave up. They did try. They tried until they couldn't anymore, until they just couldn't take it anymore, because you weren't there for them. And the survivors, they tell the story. They tell the story about how they would have been there for them, but they weren't, and that's the fact. Suicidality needs to be talked about more. It needs to be accepted more. Because not talking about it is what leads to these problems. Now, moving on, I have always been alone. I have never had the support I needed in life. Everything I have ever put effort into, I have failed at, not just jobs or relationships, but personal goals as well. I have been misunderstood to the point of being hospitalized twice for months. And I want to clarify that due to misunderstandings of my needs. Both of these times, I was against my will, locked in a hospital without the choice of leaving for months, once when I was very young, again when I was older, both times during a summer. So I missed out on the entire summer. And that was really tough. But being locked away in an institution where you are forced to learn to mask if you ever want to regain your autonomy doesn't help anybody. When you end up having a meltdown in a mental institution, their response is to have multiple people dogpile on you and inject something into you to make you groggy so that they can then throw you into a tiny room with a very bright light, no blankets, no pillow, no furniture. You're lucky to get a mattress on the floor, and you're left there for 24 hours. And by the time someone opens up the door, they're terrified of you, like you're some sort of rabid, wild animal. That's how they're looking at you. And when you start crying and saying you're sorry, now you're emotionally unstable, you're making them uncomfortable, and they just want to leave. This is how you're treated. This is why neurodivergent people do not go to therapy, do not reach out for support, do not openly talk about suicidal thoughts, because when we do, this is what happens. And it's a serious problem in our society that our emergency services are not trained to identify mental health disorders. And it happens every day, all around the world, where people with mental health disorders are treated unfairly by emergency responders, not out of malice, but out of misunderstanding. I recently heard about a story shared online about an autistic person who was suicidal. They reached out for support. They called 911. They contacted their mother. It was clearly communicated to emergency responders that the person was autistic. And the mother then contacted the emergency responders on her own to advise them that the person was autistic. And when the responders finally came to the house, the autistic who was suicidal was holding a knife, wouldn't put it down, and was shot dead. Myself, I have had public meltdowns where I was put into an extreme situation that would distress any neurotypical. And I had enough capacity to walk out of the door of that business when I had my setting event, my last straw. And I didn't make it 5 feet from the door. I collapsed into a tiny ball and I screamed at the top of my lungs at a pitch that could break my vocal cords, and I screamed. Me, someone who seems so put together, someone who can live on their own. This is what autism looks like. And I was completely incapable of helping myself, of regulating myself. I can't tell you how long it lasted. All I know is that eventually a police officer came up who was very rude, who was very unhelpful, who was very judgmental, saying things like, well, you walked over here so you can walk back, or demanding that I get up. I wasn't capable of these things at that time. Our first responders need more training to identify neurodivergent needs. Because when police get a call that someone is threatening to hurt themselves, and then they come to your door, that just completely removes your feeling of safety and security inside of your own home, where you should be safe. Because now there is someone with the right to remove all of your rights, which has happened to you in the past when you've had public meltdowns, and now they're at your home. From their perspective, they're being supportive, but from your perspective, they're being threatening. You are in a terrible mental space. You are breaking down. You are suicidal. You are depressed. And now there is a threat at your door. That's what it feels like. That's what it feels like. It's not support. It's not helpful. We need more understanding in this world. Circling back to my document, I have become so avoidant, I never leave the house. And I cannot manage to get a job because instead of looking for anything, I'm looking for what I can do without ending up in recurring panic attacks, meltdowns, or burnout. I have tried to be honest about my disability, and all I get is rejected and judged harshly. So yes, I am looking for work right now. And even just navigating job postings, navigating job postings is challenging because they're written for the company. They're written to follow processes and procedures. They're not written for the employee they're trying to hire. They're not written to actually explain what the job is, actually explain what the day-to-day tasks are, actually explain what the concrete functional requirements of the job are. A lot of jobs will say, oh, you need to have a good personality, or oh, you need a driver's license, when really you don't need those things for most jobs. And it's very confusing for someone neurodivergent to try to process and work through. And I go through all these job postings, and all I can see is that I am not a good fit for any of these positions. And while, yes, this is something that neurotypicals will struggle with, the problem is that my struggles are reinforced every single time. I try to take a job that I don't think will work out, and it doesn't work out. I have never been able to maintain a steady job, and I am trying my best to find a job where I can actually feel supported and where I'm not having constant panic attacks. And what's even worse about these situations is that when you have a meltdown at work, the response is how you affected others, how you were problematic. The response is never, are you okay? What caused that? How can we support you? Where are you confused, and what can we do to bring clarity to this working relationship? And that is a problem. Because of ableism, I cannot obtain or maintain a job. I try to disclose even before I get into an interview because I can't get past the interview. They can tell I'm autistic, but they just don't understand why I'm so different. And so they just reject me. There's a lot of really good studies on how neurotypical people subconsciously reject neurodivergence due to unconscious nonverbal social triggers that we are missing. So I try to disclose before I even get into an interview. I just get rejected every time. no matter how hard I try. The past several interviews I've been to, I've come in with written notes on my phone for stereotypical interview questions. But that doesn't help me. Most employers are accepting that you'll want to refer to a list. The problem is they don't respect it. They'll allow it, but they don't respect it. And it hurts your application process. And as a neurodivergent, you have problems taking a question and fitting your answer into that box. So you may have written out answers to what are your strengths, but when they instead ask, if I contact your previous employers, what will they say? In the moment, you don't have the processing power to understand that those answers would have fit into that question. And so you try to come up with something on the spot, and that just never works well. We have processing and understanding challenges. It's part of the disorder, and we need time to process and answer. But interviews are literally built to put you on the spot. They build questions to throw something awkward and unusual at you because they're trying to test your ability to problem solve in the moment, even if that isn't a requirement of the job. And that's just not a skill you have. They're testing your personability and how you feel and what your vibe is when you go into an interview. That's why they always insist on doing these things in person. When really, all it is a list of questions they could have just sent you after you applied. Instead, they force you to make an appointment, to go out into the world, to transmute yourself to the location, to deal with the anxiety of coming into a strange place, introducing yourself to a strange person, waiting an unknown amount of time to get into an interview, and then talking with someone senior to you who holds all the power to improve your life and trying to tell them, this is where I struggle, this is where my strengths are, I think this is a good job for me, can we work together? And they never pick you. In my last job, I was told, I don't think this job is a good fit for you. And I told them no job is a good fit for me. What I am looking for is the right community, the right workplace that will support me so that I can work to the best of my ability, because I am a good employee, but I do have struggles and I need support in order to work to the best of my ability. If the right supports were in place, I can work as good, if not better, than most of your other workers. And I know this because every single employer I've had has always told me at one point in time how good of a job I'm doing, how hard I work, how detailed I am, how thorough I am, how much I follow processes and procedures, and things of that nature. But every single time, they end up, the job just doesn't end up working out, either from one side or the other side. Either I have a meltdown and I say I can't handle this anymore, or I have a meltdown and they say they can't handle this anymore. You know, it's one or the other. Back to my document. I have tried to get therapy, optionally, on my own time, reaching out, because I realize I do need help. But I have developed so many recurring conditions and overlapping conditions and issues that are reinforced daily through lived experience that what I need is functional support in my life, because I can't just think my way out of my issues. And that's how therapists help most people. They just act as a sounding board for you to talk about your struggles, and then they talk about them back at you. How did that hurt you? Things of that nature. But I can't think my way out of these issues. I need functional support. I find therapists just get overwhelmed by the multitude of trauma and overlapping conditions that I struggle with because they don't have the skills. Something else that I frequently struggle with, moving on to something a bit more lighthearted now, I frequently burn things in the kitchen. Not only do I struggle to find something to eat, once I actually get around to eating, I am not consistent enough or present enough in the moment to be safe in the kitchen. I frequently burn myself. I frequently burn what I'm cooking. I forget the stove on. I forget the oven on, sometimes for hours, sometimes for days. Sometimes I'll go back into the kitchen for something else, and I won't even realize that there's something burning on the stove. I frequently turn on the wrong burner, even when it's labeled. I've never been able to take a pill on time, or remember when I took a pill, or if I took a pill. From a young age, I realized I could not be trusted on birth control pills, so I opted for alternative forms of birth control. When I go into a store, I am either, if I am on my own, I am blinders on. Nothing exists but my goal, in, out, get back home, get back to my safe space. I am so riddled with anxiety. And if I am with someone, I am either glued to their side or they can't find me. Because I'm constantly going off and doing my own thing, getting my own stuff, getting distracted by something. They're moving too slowly and I just want to get through the store, bang, 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 and then we get separated, and happens every time. It's like anyone I go shopping with, they have to have a leash on me, or they're constantly, where do you gotta go? Every 10 seconds. So that's what I have written down. That is my intro to my struggles with autism. I have a whole playlist called Autism Explained. There's a bunch of shorts in there that I've added to help with people who identify with these sorts of struggles. They may not be immediately, apparently, obviously relatable to someone neurotypical. There's also some podcasts and longer form content in there, which helps with research and studying deeper, delving into the symptoms, the aspects, the research, the overlapping conditions to help you understand what's going on in your own brain, what you struggle with, what you need help with. I hope that this is going to help someone. I will end this here.